Hello and welcome back to Math with Miss Murthy. Today we are looking at lesson 10.2 in Reveal Math. This is a lesson on dot plots and histograms. As usual, pause to do the warm-up and I'll share the solutions. And also pause for the standards for mathematical content and practices. Alright, today's goal is to construct dot plots and histograms using data that's been collected. Now, one of the ways to represent the data set is to construct a dot plot. A dot plot, which is a visual display of the distribution of data values, where each data value is shown as a dot above a number line. Plain and simple. So if we take a look at the number of wins in recent year by several football teams, we have this whole list. So we start off with a number line, we look at what's our smallest, what's our largest number, and we go at least one on either side of those. So we plot our numbers, equal numbers on the number line, and then as we go down the list, like I see a 10, I put a dot over 10. I see a 9, I put a dot over 9. I see two 6s, I'm putting my 2 dots over the 6s. I see two 5s, put my 2 dots, and so on and so forth. So this shows us our data that's organized, right? And we could possibly look at patterns from here. Now let's take a moment to think about how does using the visual representation allow you to make observations more easily. Take a moment, think about it. As you can see, the dot plot helps us to quickly see what are the values in patterns. Like, are there any values that have no responses? Like you can see here, no team has just 1 win or 3 wins or even 11 wins, right? Or you can see that 5 is the number of games that there are teams that have the most number of wins, right? So it helps us see quick, at a high level glance, what are possible patterns that we can see. Moving on, let's look at example 1 again. This is on page 543 of your textbook. Okay. Jasmine randomly surveyed the students in her school by asking the question, how many pets does your family own? And you see the results here. Now these results are not organized. It's just a series of responses, the number of different responses that she's received. Right. Our goal is to construct a dot plot of the data and then summarize the results. So before we go there, right, what are the numbers that we're going to plot? Let's look at what's the smallest value. We have is a 0. What's the biggest value? We have a 4. So that's what we're going to plot on our dot plot. On our number line, we have 0 through 4. And we're going to draw the number line, label it. And then for each data value, as you go down the list, you put a dot above that number. So you see a 3, you put a dot over 3. You see a 0, you put a dot over 0, right? And you keep going on as you go through the list. Now, why do you think there are no negative numbers on this number line? Because you can't have a negative number of pets, right? Now let's summarize the results. As you can see, there were a total of 24 students who responded to the survey. And if you look at this, right, students are more likely to own one or two pets than they are to own 3 or 4 pets, right? And then again, you see that there was no student who was surveyed who owned more than 4 pets. This is a quick analysis that you can do from looking at this dot plot. Now take a moment to think about is which representation, the table or the dot plot, helps you visualize the results of the survey. For me, the dot plot allows me to see an overall pattern in the data rather than looking at numbers. Like when you look at it, you have 24 numbers here. Visually, how do you tell which is the number that occurs most frequently? It's harder, whereas it's a lot easier to see it in a dot plot. All right. Moving on. Sorry, okay. I want you to pause and do this check problem on your own. This is about the number of layer research the number of calories in a serving of peanut butter from various brands. Results are shown. Construct a dot plot of the data and summarize the results. And I'll share my response in just a moment. So again, like we said, you're going to construct a dot plot. And there's your dot plot. And then summarize your result. How many brands are there? What's the brand with the greatest number of calories per serving? Brand with the least number. How many? Now here you don't have the brand name, but you can tell that how many calories that brand had, right? There you go. All right. So now that we've we worked on dot plots, we're going to try histograms, right? Now data from a frequency table. What is a frequency table? It tells us how frequently something occurs, right? So data from a frequency table can be displayed as a histogram, which is a type of bar graph that's used to display data that has been organized into groups. As you saw the dot plot, we had individual values. In a histogram, you're going to work with data that's been grouped into smaller groups, which allows us to see the frequency distribution or the quantity of data in each interval or each group. Okay. Now, when making a histogram, it is very, very critical that your intervals are equal and consecutive. Okay. There cannot be gaps in your intervals, and the intervals should be of equal sizes so that you can make accurate observation about the data based on the heights of the bars. Let's take a look at this one, for example. If you look here, your interval, the first interval is 25 to 49, 49.99. The next one we have is 50 to 74.99. When you're talking about money, this ends in 1 cent, the next cent would take you to $50, right? And then you see that there are no gaps between these intervals, right? And again, all the intervals are equal in size. They're all $24.99. That's the size of the interval. So now when you compare the heights of the bars, it's a fair comparison because your intervals are equal sizes. And intervals with a frequency of 0, where there is no occurrence, it's going to have a bar height of 0, right? And again, when you do your bar graphs, there is going to be no space between two consecutive bars because the intervals are consecutive. Okay. Now let's think about this for a moment. For which representation, a dot plot or a histogram, can you see all the individual data values? You would see the individual data values in a dot plot. So when might you choose a histogram as compared to a dot plot? When might you choose a histogram over a dot plot? Well, if you have a large number of data, like you saw with a dot plot, you're plotting the discrete points of data, right? With a histogram, what you're doing is you're taking an interval, you're putting things into groups, and then you're counting how many are there in that group. So when you have a large data set, then a histogram would be more efficient to construct. All right, let's take a look at this example. Right now we have moved on to page 545. A park ranger at a state park was asked the question, how many daily visitors attended the park each day for the first 20 days of May? And this table here shows you the results. Our goal is to construct a histogram to represent the data. Okay. Now, think about it. What are the intervals that we're going to select for the histogram? I'm going to put that here so we can take a quick look at this. Okay. Now I'm going to look for my smallest value. So far, I see my smallest value over here as I go down the list is 108. Okay. And then I'm going to look for my largest value, 209. I see a 236. I see a 263. Then I see a 382. So that's my largest value, right? So my intervals I'm going to select should include 108 and 382 overall, right? So I'm going to start off from 100 and go all the way to 400, or let's say instead of 400, 399. I'm going to make the interval size 50, right? So let's make a frequency table which lists our intervals. So with visitors, I'm going to say 100 to 149, 150 to 199, 200 to 249, 250 to 299, 300 to 349, and 350 to $3.99. Right? There you go. That's my frequency table. And once I have my scale, once I have the 100 to 399, I make it equally spaced. Again, you don't want to have too few number of intervals. Like you see, you would have 8 intervals over here. If you make the number of intervals, say only 3 or 4, then it's harder to see the spread of your data. And then once we have this number, we're going to again go through our list. And as you go down the list, 108 means you add 1 to this frequency and you're going to tally it up, and that gives you your frequency table. How many times do you have between 100 and 149 visitors? That would be 2. So if you look at it, that would be, say, this 108. And where's the other one that falls within this interval? 137, right? That's 2. The next step is going to be to construct a histogram. We need to draw and label our axis, right? What is the number of axes? Like you can see here, we're looking at, again, on a histogram, you're presenting frequencies. So your frequency is always going to go on your y-axis, okay? So I'm just going to label this as frequency here, or you could label it along the side. Actually, let's do that. And then on my x-axis is going to be visitors. And then I'm going to put my ranges on my x-axis over here. So that would be 100 to 149. Because here, my next one's going to be 150 to 199. And again, on my y-axis, I'm going to have the number of visitors. So I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can see you don't need to go much beyond 8. I'm just going to plot 1 beyond the 8. That takes it to 9, okay? There you go. So we have our the range, which goes into our number of visitors and the frequency, and then we're going to plot the data that we have as bars. So for each interval, we're going to draw a bar with a height that's indicated by the frequency table. So you can see for 100 to 149, I have a bar that has a height of 2. Right? Now, what observations can you make about the data by studying the histogram? Take a look at this histogram, right? I could say, for example, on most days, the number of visitors were between 150 and 250, or 150 to 249. Right? There were a lot fewer days that had 100 to 149 or more than 250 visitors. That would be one example of an observation that I can make. What other observations can you make from this? Okay. Moving on, I want you to work on this check problem on your own. Pause it, solve the check problem. And there you go. Again, your graph is going to depend on the intervals you select. And how do you select those intervals? When you look at this, right, you have data that varies from 0 all the way through 14, right? Now, you could choose to do, say, 0 to 5. No, I'm going to make that 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, right? But that only gives you 3 intervals. So all your data is obviously going to be concentrated in those 3. So you want to make sure you have a good spread. I would recommend you have at least 5 intervals, right? And again, it depends, like the previous problem where we had data from 100, ranging from 100 to 400, just 5 would give me an odd interval size of, say, 80. So I'm choosing to go with 8 intervals of 50 each, right? Again, make your choices such that you spread it out so that you can actually see patterns in your data, rather than have it all, clumped up into just 2 or 3 small ranges. Now here's the exit ticket. I will be posting this on the Google form, And I hope you've made any notes on any questions you've had. And please do send in those questions on your exit ticket, and I will see you in class. Bye-bye.